Learned a new word. All right, hold on. I'm not even in here. Let's see. All right, good morning, everybody. So the little story of the morning is I had a member lined up to do the opening this morning, and her child got unfortunately sick, so she can't do it. She's going to be rescheduled. So this happened yesterday afternoon, and so I decided that I'm going to share a devotional that I shared with the leaders several years ago. I think it was 2022. So excuse me for reading it, probably a lot of it, but it was last minute. So you get excited. You still have another personal story coming in a couple weeks after spring break, but this is me sharing a little bit of me this morning. So here we go. All right. The title is Rebekah's Cave, but it's really based on the cave of Adullam. I looked up this morning, how do you really say that? Because I'm always like, is it Adullam? But I did this when we were studying 1st and 2nd Samuel several years ago, for those of y'all who were around then. So chapter 22 of 1 Samuel begins David's road of return to the Lord. After he had lost a bit of faith, even though he had the prophecy of being future king, he had lost a little bit of faith, you might remember. He had been the celebrated hero and all that stuff, and then he was hunted by Saul, and he was broken, and he was alone, and he was confused. So here we find him hiding in this cave. Why? I think it was because God wanted him to learn a lesson, or 2, or 3, or 4, and often God has to get our attention in a way that is uncomfortable for us. David was able to turn his dark cave into a prayer closet, and he began to really pray and really listen, which I think was the key. I think we all have a cave of Adullam, and we end up there, usually, because God has a message for us. It could also be known as a time in the belly of the fish, in a lion's den, or roaming around in the wilderness. We use all these phrases, but whatever we call it, it is generally brought on, I think, by getting caught up in this life. It's stress, it's busyness, it's figuring things out our way, our plan, our list, until we find ourselves wondering, where did I go wrong? And why aren't things working out the way I thought they would? While I think I am more mature at this point, and even now, 4 years later, yes, at this point, I think I am more mature. Well, I know I'm more mature in years, but I think I'm maybe more mature spiritually, hopefully as well. It's always like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? I still have a long way to go, but I have been put in my personal cave of Adullam a few times, and I thought I would share one of those with y'all. I've had a couple of major health battles I fought in the last 10 years, so I was thinking, I've shared about that a bunch, so I probably will need to think about something else. So I thought about the time my life fell apart after the final breakup of a 3-year relationship. I thought about some of the times I've been estranged from my mother. Those were hard. I thought about when I was on bed rest with my 2nd pregnancy. That was hard. Those unplanned and difficult events were all times that, in hindsight, provided perfect opportunities for me to draw closer to God. Sadly, I think, because I had been brought low and had nothing more pressing on my brain and in my heart when these bad things happened. You know, that's just the reality. But really, one experience in my personal cave rises above the others in terms of recent memory, length of stay in the cave, and how deep into the cave I explored, and how low I was brought throughout my time there. Yes, it is my breast cancer battle, and yes, I've talked about it, but I'm talking about it one more time. I think that's okay because it is such a big part of my story now, so I think it's okay to share it one more time. I've come to accept that this is part of my story, and I certainly wasn't thinking about David, of all people, after my diagnosis. And I'm not even sure I had any idea about prayer closets. But what I did know from the very beginning was that there was no way I could go through 20 weeks of chemo without God. This from a girl who literally was fainting every time they drew blood, which was multiple times a week. I could not handle it, y'all. And that became a whole thing, but that's another story and I digress. As the process continued and my initial diagnosis changed from stage 1 to stage 2 cancer, I knew I had a full mastectomy on the horizon. I sank even lower. I thought about real death for the first time. What are my kids going to do without me? Your mind goes crazy. Almost 5 months of chemo has a way of wearing a family down. And I say family because you don't go through this type of thing alone. And while I was praying at the outset, over time, I did develop some new prayer habits. And this one's hard, so I'm going to try to be careful. One of my very first times to ever pray on my knees occurred in the shower. Sorry. You know, they tell you 99% of patients will lose their hair, usually within a week to 10 days of the first chemo. And I thought I understood that. So I was super careful with my hair. I mean, I know this is total vanity, you guys. I was like very gently brushing, and I was doing it as minimally as possible. I was skipping shampoos until it was nasty. But you gotta bathe. And on that particular morning, as I stood under the water, I looked down, and a bunch of my hair was on the floor of the shower. And I'll never forget it. And I guess it might sound silly, but I was so shocked that it took my breath away. In that moment, I realized I must have been holding out some kind of false hope that I would be the 1% that didn't lose their hair. I dropped to my knees and I tried to breathe, and I just pleaded with God to help me get through this. I think that was one of a series of moments that really slammed me in the face, and it was all I could do to just kneel in the shower and cry out to God, saying, I cannot do this alone. Going forward, instead of waiting on the wind to be knocked out of me, I actually used my real closet in my house as a prayer closet on a regular basis. It is a private closet. I'm blessed with a walk-in closet, and it's big enough that I had space that I put a blanket. By the way, people like to give blankets when you're going through chemo, and that is a huge blessing for everybody going through a bad illness. A soft blanket is amazing. So I had I won't say a favorite, but yeah, a favorite blanket and a pillow, and I put it out in the closet, and I prayed much more often than usual throughout this process. And my time in the prayer closet was extra special because that is where I was on my knees. I felt much more vulnerable during those times of confession and pleading with God, and there were long periods of silence on my part as I just listened. And that was not normal in my prayer life. It's like, here's my list of things I need and things I want and all that. And you know, your priorities get real clear when you go through something like this, as I'm sure many of you know, or all of you know. My dad taught me to listen carefully for God because he speaks in quiet whispers. In my healthy daily life, unfortunately, I do not do this as well or as often as I should, and I regret that. But like David, during this time, literally in my prayer closet and throughout the cancer battle that was my figurative cave of Adullam, all the distractions dropped away, and it seemed so much easier to hear from God. So, God most definitely got my attention with my cave experience, just as he got David's attention. The question is, what will you do? What will I do next time? If there is a next time, there probably will be. When your turn in the cave comes around, what will I do? What will you do? Will I make excuses? Will I become angry? Will I have a pity party? Yes, I did have a pity party big time at the beginning. Will I throw my hands up in despair? I did all of those things for stretches of time, but finally landed in a good place. I don't mean to liken myself to David too much, but in the cave of Adullam, he turned back to God, and that is the best possible response to entering a dark time. David is credited with writing, as we know, lots and lots of Psalms. So I'm only going to quote from one, don't worry, from Psalm 118, around the same time of this 1 Samuel 22 events in the cave. It reads, "When hard pressed, I cried to the Lord. The Lord is my strength and my defense. He has become my salvation." And finally, "The Lord has chastened me severely, but he has not given me over to death. Open for me the gates of the righteous. I will enter and give thanks to the Lord." So again, I ask, what will you do when your time in the cave comes? The end. All right. On that happy note, y'all are dismissed.